Madam President, I rise to honor the life and legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The nation mourns the loss of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who died Friday night. Madam President, she died on the eve of the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah. She was the first Jewish woman on the U.S. Supreme Court. And rabbis tell us a very interesting thing about individuals who die right before the New Year. They suggest that these are very righteous people who die at the very end of the year because they were needed until the very end. Under Jewish tradition, those who die on the New Year holiday are considered tzedeks, a title given to the righteous and saintly. Certainly, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was entitled to this honor, being righteous and saintly. At her confirmation hearing, Justice Ginsburg talked about her immigrant experience. You see, her father was a Jewish immigrant. Her mother was barely a second-generation American. So she talked about American values. And then she said, "What has happened of me could only happen in America." And then she spent her entire career protecting those values that make America the great nation it is and the reason why people come here in order to reach their full potential. It guided her well in her public service. Justice Ginsburg was both an inspiration and a trailblazer in every sense of the word. After breaking through the countless barriers thrown in her path, she redefined what is meant to be both a thoughtful jurist and a dedicated public servant. Let me just briefly go over some of her incredible accomplishments. First, in her undergraduate class at Cornell University. First female member of the Harvard Law Journal, graduating first in her class at Columbia Law School. First female professor at Columbia University to earn tenure. Justice Ginsburg directed the ACLU Women's Rights Project and argued 6 landmark cases before the Supreme Court, winning 5 of those cases. These cases protected not only the rights of women, but also many men who face discrimination as well. As the National Women's Law Center wrote about Justice Ginsburg's death, they said, her passing is cause for us to pause and honor the unparalleled mark she has left on this country. From co-founding the ACLU's Women's Rights Project to bringing the first case striking down a law that discriminated against women, to building the case that defined the standard for sex discrimination cases, Ginsburg was a visionary who revolutionized the gender equality movement and the law long before becoming a Supreme Court justice. For our country, Ginsburg's ethos was greater than just the law. She was an icon and a living symbol of a North Star. So we must unite and do for her what she did for us: fight for what is right. As a litigator, Judge Ginsburg helped to shape the law, convincing the Supreme Court that equal protection of the law under the 14th Amendment applied not only to racial discrimination, but to gender discrimination as well. And Justice Ginsburg herself knew discrimination firsthand as she struggled to find a job after graduating law school, notwithstanding her sterling qualifications. She had that difficulty, as we all know, solely because of her gender. She experienced gender discrimination firsthand, and she did something about it, not only for herself, but for future generations. After serving on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia for 13 years, she began a 27-year career on the United States Supreme Court. Madam President, there are so many of her decisions that were so consequential, so visionary, expressing the right value, and her ability to express her views was unquestioned. She did that in writing majority opinions, and she is well known for doing that in writing dissenting opinions. So many of her dissenting opinions led the way for change. She was right, and she motivated change. In 1996, Justice Ginsburg wrote the majority opinion of the court in the finding that the all-male admissions policy at the state-supported Virginia Military Institute was unconstitutional. She said in that opinion, generalizations about the way women are, estimates of what is appropriate for most women, no longer justify denying opportunity to women whose talent and capacity place them outside the average description. Any differential treatment, she concluded, must not create or perpetuate the legal, social, and economic inferiority of women. What a difference she made in that decision. I will always remember her dissenting opinion in the Lilly Ledbetter case because it led directly to change. Justice Ginsburg wrote in that fiery dissent, "Our precedent suggests, and lower courts have overwhelmingly held, that the unlawful practice is the current payment of salaries infected by gender-based or race-based discrimination, a practice that occurs whenever a paycheck delivers less to a woman than a similarly situated man." I heard one of my colleagues talk about precedent. Well, here we see the court reversing precedent in order to advance discrimination against women. Her dissent led to congressional action becoming the first piece of legislation signed by President Barack Obama. The text of this bill hung on her office wall for good reason, as it embodied her spirit. She issued a fiery dissent again in the Shelby County versus Holder case in 2013, a case decided, Madam President, by a 5-4 vote of the Supreme Court of the United States, which gutted the voting rights of 1965. Here's what she said in that opinion. "What has become of the court's usual restraint?" Justice Ginsburg wrote in her dissenting opinion, "The great men who led the march from Selma to Montgomery and there called for the passage of the Voting Rights Act foresaw progress even in Alabama. The arc of the moral universe is long," he said, "but it bends towards justice. If there is steadfast commitment to see the task through to completion, that commitment has been disserved by today's decision, throwing out preclearance when it has worked and is continuing to work to stop discriminatory changes is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you're not getting wet." I mention these cases to underscore the importance of the Supreme Court, of a Supreme Court justice in the lives of all Americans. So much is at stake in the filling of Justice Ginsburg's vacancy. It will have real consequences on all of our constituents. Let me just give you a few examples of what is likely to be taken up by the Supreme Court that could affect my constituents in Maryland and the constituents around the nation. Your health care is literally on the line. The Affordable Care Act that President Trump has tried to repeal, and the Republicans to try to repeal in this body, but have failed, they're now going to take it to the Supreme Court. A hearing is scheduled this November. This is a real risk for tens of millions of Americans who depend on the law for their health coverage and other benefits. 20 million Americans could lose their health care, and people with pre-existing conditions could lose those protections. That's 133 million Americans during the coronavirus pandemic. That's what's at risk. We're talking about individuals who pregnancy or cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, behavioral health disorders, high cholesterol, asthma, chronic lung disease, heart conditions, and numerous others have been held to be pre-existing conditions. That protection's in the Affordable Care Act. That's on the line before the Supreme Court this November. That's why Americans are concerned that we follow the right process in selecting the next individual to serve on the Supreme Court of the United States. If the Affordable Care Act is struck down, insurers could bring back annual and lifetime limits on coverage. Adults covered by Medicaid expansion would lose vital health services. Young people would be kicked off of their parents' insurance, and insurers could sell skimpy plans that don't even cover essential health benefits, like prescription drugs, emergency room visits, mental health, and substance use and maternity care. The Affordable Care Act increased access to care for millions who were previously uninsured or underinsured. Through Medicaid expansion, 13 million low-income Americans now have dependable, comprehensive health. In Maryland alone, over 1.3 million low-income individuals depend on Medicaid, including 512,000 low-income children, 107,000 seniors, 152,000 individuals with disabilities. That's in Maryland. We must protect Medicaid expansion population and other uninsured and underinsured populations from the Trump's effort to eliminate their access to affordable care. It's at risk. This vacancy is critically important to protecting health care. And there are so many other issues. Women's reproductive rights, clearly at risk. Roe v. Wade. I understand it's established precedent, but look what this Supreme Court has been willing to do in reversing precedent. We know Roe v. Wade is in the crosshairs for change by the Supreme Court, and one more justice appointed to support that position of women's right of choice could very well be in jeopardy. But our most vulnerable individuals are at risk as well. Let me talk about one specific group of people, some of our immigrants. On June 18, 2020, in a 5-4 decision written by Justice Roberts and joined by Justice Ginsburg, the Supreme Court held that the Department of Homeland Security violated the law when it rescinded the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival (DACA) program. There are approximately 643,000 DACA recipients in the United States, and approximately 29,000 are healthcare workers, essential workers, whose service during the COVID-19 pandemic has saved lives and eased suffering. But for that 5-4 decision, those individuals' lives could have been totally disrupted, and they've been ordered to leave our country. These are individuals who know no other home but the United States of America. They're our neighbors and friends. And yet, 5-4 decision of the Supreme Court, Justice Ginsburg will no longer be there. This next justice could very well determine the fate of the Dreamers. The LGBTQ community. In the Obergefell versus Hodges case, the Supreme Court, by a 5-4 decision, held the Constitution guarantees same-sex couples the right to marry. That's a 5-4 decision. I always expected that in America we would move forward in protecting individual rights under our Constitution, that each Congress and each session of the Supreme Court would advance those rights for individuals' protection under the Constitution of the United States. The filling of the Supreme Court vacancy could very well reverse a trend of protecting rights and denying many in our community their rights. And I could cite many, many other examples of what's at risk by the Supreme Court appointment. So there are many reasons why we believe that we should follow the proper process in selecting the next Supreme Court justice. So let's talk a little bit about what process we should follow. Let's talk a little bit about fairness. Let's talk about the integrity of the Senate. Let's talk about living up to our own words. Let's talk about using the same rules for Democrats that you use for Republicans. Let's talk about the fairness of the process. Now, Madam President, I could spend a lot of time on the floor quoting the comments of so many of my colleagues, that spoke on the floor of the United States Senate 4 years ago on the Merrick Garland nomination by President Obama, and how they spoke about the importance of listening to the voters of our nation. How they said we didn't have the time, and remember, the Merrick Garland was in February of the election year, that appointment. Didn't have the time to do this. That we needed to withhold taking up the nomination. That it was up to the voters to act first. And that this had nothing to do with the fact that it was a Democrat in the White House. So many of our colleagues said, if there was a Republican elected in 2016 and the Senate's controlled by the Republicans, we would say the same thing. Hold off. Let the voters have a chance. But let me just quote from one of our colleagues. In 2016, Senate Republicans refused to consider the nomination of Judge Merrick Garland, President Obama's nominee for the Supreme Court vacancy. They would not meet with Judge Garland, hold a hearing on his nomination, or allow votes for 293 days. Justice Scalia died on February of 2016. President Obama nominated Merrick Garland, a respected D.C. Circuit judge with bipartisan support, in March of 2016. In the case of Justice Ginsburg's vacancy in 2020, there were about 40 days away from a general election, and early and absentee voting had already begun in several states. By contrast, in 2016, the formal presidential primary election had just begun to occur when Justice Scalia died. So our colleagues spoke up then and said, look, 4 years ago, our Republican colleagues said, not enough time, leave it up to the voters. We would do this whether it's a Democrat or Republican. Let me just quote from one of our colleagues, the Republican leader, Mitch McConnell. And this is his quote on the floor of the Senate. Mr. President, the next justice could fundamentally alter the direction of the Supreme Court and have a profound impact on our country. So of course, the American people should have a say in the court's direction. As Chairman Grassley and I declared weeks ago and reiterate personally to President Obama, the Senate will continue to observe the Biden rule so that the American people have a voice in this momentous decision. The American people may well elect a president who decides to nominate Judge Garland for Senate consideration. The next president may also nominate someone very different. Either way, our view is this. Give the people a voice in filling of this vacancy. As we continue working on the issues like these, the American people are perfectly capable of having their say on this issue, so give them a voice. Let the American people decide, end quote. Senator Mitch McConnell. So, Madam President, we have the McConnell rule, established by the Republican leader. Let's follow the McConnell rule and let the American people pick the next president and Senate so they can weigh in on this decision, just as Senator McConnell argued in 2016 with President Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, for Justice Scalia's seat. Let the Senate honor Justice Ginsburg's legacy by continuing to fight for the rights she fought for her entire career, both as a litigator, circuit judge, and finally as a Supreme Court justice. Let us honor Justice Ginsburg's dying wish. My most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed. Madam President, I yield the floor.